It's a bit tough writing a sermon about temptation when you know that it is going to follow a sermon about sin, which is what our children's sermon was about today. Both topics generally make people uncomfortable. And when people become uncomfortable, the fight or flight response usually kicks in. The body releases hormones that cause it to go on high alert. The heart and lungs go into overdrive. We might become energized, more focused, even hypervigilant. And then perspiration increases, and it just goes downhill from there. After all, who wants to admit that there are things in their lives, desires, urges, call them what you would like, that are so powerful that the only course of action seems to be to let them do what it is that they do. They lure us in. They entice us. They draw us in. They pull us closer. Temptation is the feeling we get when we know we should avoid something, that we probably shouldn't do it, but we feel compelled to do it anyway. Maybe it's eating or drinking something we know that we shouldn't. Maybe it's spending money that we know we shouldn't or that we don't have. Maybe it's exercising power over someone or something just because we can, or because we are angry or frustrated. When temptation strikes, we need to watch out. We might be too curious for our own good. We might feel powerless to hold back. We might think, it's not like eating one cupcake or having an extra cup of coffee is going to have a major impact on my health. It's not like spending a few dollars on a few extras is going to break the bank. And besides, we might rationalize, besides, I've earned it. I've had a bad day. Or we might say, well, it's not for me anyway. It's not like I'm exercising that much power. I should be able to push back. I should have a little more control. And it feels pretty darn good sometimes, doesn't it? To feel a little bit more in control when our lives are out of control. And besides, we don't need to worry about sin and temptation because we can go to Las Vegas and there won't be any ramifications for exercising our freedom and overindulging, because what happens there stays there. Well, not so fast. What happens there stays there, or as they say, what happens here stays here, is a great slogan. But let's face it, that's not what being a Christian is all about. You've heard me say it before, and I'm going to say it again. Being a Christian is hard work. It takes dedication. You're here this week watching this video. You've set aside time to do so, to think about what the sermon has to say, what the message is. That takes dedication. Being a Christian is a journey, and it calls for us to have faith and to be faithful. And at times, it also requires us to dig deep, to ask for help, and to seek forgiveness. Sometimes we need to do both of those things. Because, after all, we are human. Temptation is a universal human experience. Just as Jesus faced temptation in the wilderness, we do so in our lives. We face temptation in our lives, most of the time, every day. And some of us face more temptation than others. But the message is, we are not alone. The devil tried to appeal to Jesus in a way that showed Jesus' humanity. The devil tried to tempt Jesus with food when Jesus was hungry. That's a physical desire. And then the devil tried to tempt Jesus with power and recognition. But Jesus would have none of it. Instead, Jesus stood up to the devil, stood up to temptation, and quoted Scripture. One does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God. Again, it is written, do not put the Lord your God to the test. And then Jesus said, away with you, Satan, for it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve only him. When we are faced with temptation, what can we do? Well, one of the things we could do as Christians is we could quote Scripture. As Jesus demonstrated, it was an effective way to move beyond what the devil had to offer and to move beyond the temptation. Now, I certainly wouldn't want to discourage anyone from quoting Scripture. That's a personal decision. That's something that you need to decide for yourself, whether it is right for your journey. But what we can do, and what I'd like you to think about, is what about choosing to live as God commands us? Living according to God's will. Being faithful because that's what we are called to do as Christians. What about using prayer to resist temptation? What about drawing strength from one another and asking for strength from God and going to God in prayer? What I'm also reminded about with this story is that it doesn't end with temptation. After Jesus is tempted, the angels return. No matter how great the temptation and our response to it, we can always turn back to God. It doesn't matter how many times we have to do that to find hope, to find purpose, and to find forgiveness. We can always turn to God.